welcome back and welcome to another video in my build log series of the Trumpeter 1:200 scale model of the Titanic. This is, I believe, part 86, but do correct me if I'm wrong. In today's episode, I am going to be doing two things. I'm adding deck chairs to the boat deck, both collapsed deck chairs and deployed deck chairs, and then I'm also adding all of the figures to the boat deck as well. So there's four sections to the boat deck. You've got the officer's promenade right at the forward end, then you've got the first class promenade, then you've got the engineer's promenade, really small sliver at the engine casing section, and then last of all you've got the second class promenade. So we've got four different types of people to paint and stick down, and of course all the deck chairs as well. So a lot to be accomplished in today's episode. So without any further ado, let's crack on. You join me in the shed, and today I am doing about as close as I ever get to mass production. Here are lots of figures for the boat deck, and as you can see, what I've done is I've separated them out into the different sort of groupings that they would have, you know, different paint colours for. So I've got ladies over here, and I've tried to group them as far as possible into sort of younger and older ladies, and then also children here. The idea being, these are all stuck onto lollipop sticks, the idea being that I can go along and just spray all of them with a base colour, and then once we've got that base colour I can pick out the finer detail, you know, hats or shoes or ribbons or whatever, with a brush by hand afterwards. But the basis here is that we're going to do a flat colour, so all of these people will have a base flat colour. Same on this strip, same on this strip, so on and so on. So that's the ladies over there. We've then got officers, and of course their flat colour will be a sort of royal blue. And then lastly we've got gentlemen as well, and again some children in the mix here. And each one of these strips will be a different colour. So again, we'll be doing sort of fairly mundane colours, greys, browns, greens and blues probably. But the idea of this is, I'm always a bit nervous when I do lots and lots of figures that I'll sort of subliminally end up painting the same 4 or 5 things 100 times. You know, I want to try to twist my arm into getting as much variety as possible. So I thought by making lots of different strips and very deliberately using a different colour for each, I will hopefully end up with a reasonable amount of variety, which is of course exactly what I want. So let's get on and spray some of these things. So I haven't actually filmed my painting of any of these figures because it's really not that interesting, but what I have done is I've taken some photos of the finished article. So here are the collection of officers that I've done, and a selection of first-class ladies in some fashion of the time. I've done some research to try to get sort of colourings for dresses and stuff reasonably accurate. And I've also been fairly selective of the figures that I've chosen, and I've only really chosen figures that are in fairly heavy dresses. Because as I say, I think it would have been pretty cold on the boat deck of Titanic, so only people with pretty robust clothing would have been out there. And here is a selection of first class and second class men, all in suits, and again, fairly sort of standard colours, browns and greys. The men are usually pretty easy to paint actually, because it's a simple matter of spraying them a flat colour and then adding a sort of sliver of white for a shirt underneath the jacket really. So these are by far the more simple figures to paint. In the same clothing I've also done a selection of people sitting down as well to occupy things like benches and deck chairs and stuff like that. And for the first time I've also painted some children as well, so we've got sort of babies all the way up to sort of teenagers, again in sort of varying types of clothing. Most of the boys are in suits and most of the girls are in reasonably sort of fancy dresses and stuff like that, as you might expect on first class passengers. Another thing that I've painted up is a selection of dogs. Now, very, very unpopular viewpoint to have in this day and age, but I'm really not a big fan of dogs, I'm afraid. I tend to be allergic to them. Anyway, quite a few people had asked in the comments if I was going to add any dogs to the model, and in the end I did think it was quite a good idea, because of course there were a reasonable number of animals on Titanic. So I thought it was a good idea. So I painted 3 dogs, and they will be positioned on the aft end of B deck, and then 2 on the poop deck. Never let it be said that I don't listen to the comments on these videos. Right, here we go. first class, second class, and also some officers and crew. All of the people, in short, that I need to decorate the boat deck. I'm hoping not to use them all because, as I've said before, I don't want the deck to look hugely crowded because I do think it'll be quite chilly up there. That said, it's always very deceptive to predict how many people you will actually need to make something look crowded. So we'll see. There's a good sort of 150 odd people there, so there's a lot. But whether that will actually be enough to make the deck look busy or not, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully it will, because hopefully it doesn't need saying that I don't particularly want to have to paint any more of these things. Anyway, so we'll make a start now at sticking these down. Right, so I'm just going to start creating some folded deck chairs. And as you can see, in fact, I've actually already made a few. Here's one. As you can see, they look quite nice. They look like a sort of cluster of matchsticks at this scale, but really that's good enough for what we want. So you can see some more over there. So to produce these, I am using this kit, which is by Tom's Model Works. I've already put a link in the description, but check it out. They do two different kits. They do this one, which I've already cut all of the deck chairs out, which is a folded deck chair set. And they also do this one, which is a deployed deck chair set. So two to choose from. I've bought both, although, as I've said before, I've sort of come to the conclusion that most of the deck chairs on the Titanic would probably have been folded away, because I just can't see people being out on the deck sitting down or lying on deck chairs, because I just think it would be so cold. I think it would be Baltic, and I think the vast majority of people would either be walking around the decks or probably just inside. So most of my deck chairs are going to be folded. I will do a few deployed deck chairs, but not very many. So to make this, you need the two pieces. You need the legs and then the actual seat portion. And when it's all put together, it ends up looking like a jumble of matchsticks, really. To start with, we just need to fold this in a sort of Z shape. So get the seat back and fold, and then get the sort of leg support portion and also fold that. And there you have it. And there we've got the deck chair folded away. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to glue this down onto the legs. So what I tend to do is I stick a blade through the slats of the wood, which allows me to pick it up. And then I get a bit of glue. In this case, I'm using quite a thick glue because I don't want thin glue sort of running everywhere. And I just apply a small amount to either side of the deck chair. So I've got some glue here and some glue on the other side. And then it's a simple matter of just plonking this down on top of the legs, lifting off and letting it dry. And there's your finished collapsed deck chair. And I'll just move that over to one side and we'll move on to the next. Okay, that's all of the collapsed deck chairs I have, and as you can see, they're just sort of dotted around here, there, and everywhere. There's a few over there, there's a few there, a few on the other side, a few sort of squirreled away, a few over there as well, some more over there, a large stack right at the back there. Basically what I've done is I've just propped them up against likely places. You know, people will probably have deployed deck chairs along here, so there's a few propped up in these sections, and similarly along here there might have been a few. I've just sort of put them out the way because the whole point of stacking them is that they are out the way, but nonetheless they're still pretty visible and they still sort of enhance the model. And I think what's nice about them is that they add a certain sort of imperfection to it, you know, because ultimately these get taken out in the morning, put back at night. They're not sort of ship shape in the way that a lot of things on the ship would have been. They're just they're kept in a convenient place because they're used so regularly, and so because of that they do just look a bit like a sort of pile of matchsticks, really. You know, they're just sort of folded up, chucked against the wall where they're not going to move, and Bob's your uncle. You know, they're kept in discreet places, but nonetheless they're stacked, and they, you know, they look a bit sort of, there's a couple of them who are a bit uneven, and that's the whole idea behind this. You know, that I don't want them to look like they've been pristinely put away in a perfect way, because ultimately you wouldn't bother, would you? If you're getting it out in 3 hours time, why would you bother putting it away in such a neat manner? So that's the deck chairs, and I'm very happy with those. Right, I'm just going to start on the officers' promenade now. So that's this section here. And the first thing to say is that I'm not going to add very many officers because there's a very, very good interview that was done by the BBC with Charles Lightoller, who was second officer on Titanic. And it was done quite a long time after Titanic sank. I think it was done sometime in the 50s. But it's a really interesting interview, and he goes into quite a lot of depth on the sinking and also, to start with, the operation of the ship. And I think it is on YouTube, so it's worth trying to find it if you can. But anyway, one of the things that he says, which I think makes a lot of sense, is that if you're on duty, obviously you're on the bridge, you're going about your job. If as an officer you're not on duty, the single least helpful thing you can do is to be on the bridge getting in the way, because people on the bridge are doing their job and they cannot afford to be distracted from that for a second. So my feelings here are that when they're not on duty, officers really would not be anywhere near the bridge. They would probably be either in their cabins sleeping or eating, or doing something out of the way, but not on the bridge, getting in the way. So for that reason, I'm not going to put many people on the officers' promenade because, you know, voices carry and there's just too much potential for distraction. I'm going to put a few people, but really not very many. So we'll go into time lapse now, and I'll add these people down. Okay, first class promenade now. And as you can see, I've already added 2 people in, a couple of people sitting on deck chairs. I'm going to focus mainly on the port side, and that's because I've explained this before, and you'll probably have noticed that I put all my deck chairs on the port side as well. What I wanted to do, and I've done this on the lower decks as well, is make it sort of appear that there was a sort of warmer, perhaps more sheltered side to the ship. So with all of the people that I've added, there is a tendency for more people to be on the port side than the starboard side. And certainly people that aren't walking around, people who are sitting and therefore, you know, subject to potentially getting a bit chilly, they tend to be seated on the more sheltered side of the ship, the port side. So that's the rationale. I will be putting people on the starboard side as well, but just not as many as the port. So that's the plan. We'll go back into time lapse and we'll start adding some people down into this area of the ship now. So I thought I'd just briefly demonstrate the value of this stuff. So this is called activator or kicker, and this is essentially a spray that makes CA glue, super glue, dry almost instantaneously. And I'll show you why it is so useful in certain situations, particularly when you are trying to glue very, very fine people down who don't really balance and who are very difficult to hold for a long time with tweezers because they're so delicate. So I've plunked the person down, little spray, and it's already dried and I can take that off. If I didn't have activator, I'll just demonstrate. Holding. Hang on. I'm waiting for the glue to dry. Nope, stop. Okay. That kind of proves my point, I suppose. It takes a while for the glue to dry without the activator, which is challenging. So it's a useful product. Doesn't smell very nice, but it is a useful product, and I've used it an awful lot on this model. So then, here we are, and as you can see, all of the people have been added. Officers, first class, engineers on their own promenade, and then second class as well. So there we go. And of course there are people on the other side. The ship really does feel alive now. It's nice. It really does sort of, gives the impression of a ship with people that, lived and breathed, which is really lovely, actually. So that pretty much concludes the modelling, really. There's a few things to do. We need to add a few little jibs along the side for coaling. And I need to add some flagpoles and stuff. But after that, we're pretty much onto the rigging, and that is it. So we are frighteningly close to finishing this now. Incidentally, I've had a lot of questions from people about how I'm going to approach the rigging, particularly with the need to be able to remove the superstructure. I've got some ideas, and that is why The aftermast, or the main mast, is actually missing at the moment. I've removed it because I'm trying out a few ideas on it. Because, of course, this is rather the problem with Titanic. If both masts were not on the superstructure, it would be really, really easy to do the rigging. In fact, the foremast rigging is very easy because you don't need to worry about taking the superstructure off for the foremast, with the exception of one or two small lines that go up to the funnel. But with the aftermast being on a deck here, huge amounts of rigging come down from the aftwell deck and also the poop deck onto it, which of course means removing the superstructure becomes a lot harder. Anyway, that's a job for another video. It's in the works, as I say, and we'll see how we manage it. I'll finish off now with some commentary on various different scenes that I've built up with passengers. You know, I've got a few sort of scenes of passengers having a discussion or people responding to something, but they're more easily explained with a still image rather than me holding a camera. So we'll finish the video with that, and I will see you in the next one. So here we are, the first of the still shots, and this is on the poop deck with a lady walking her dog along to the back of the ship. And here is another one of the dogs, just lying down on the deck, gazing up at their owner sitting on a bench, again on the poop deck. This is a shot showing the band playing on A deck, and as you can see there's a bit of a crowd on A deck looking at the band. There's also a slight mass of people on the boat deck looking down, trying to get an idea of what the source of the noise is below. This photo here is sort of trying to emulate quite a famous picture of Titanic, taken sort of looking forward along the boat deck, showing the huge stack of deck chairs just aft of the raised ceiling of the first class smoking room at the base of the fourth funnel. This little scene is a young lad being told off by his mum and dad, and also his younger sister sort of hiding behind his mum's skirts, perhaps a little bit scared of the raised voices. And this is my personal favourite, largely because this is exactly what I'd have been doing if I was on Titanic. Young lad, possibly with his dad or his granddad, gone as far forward as he can go on the first class promenade, trying to get a glimpse of what's going on the bridge. So there we go, that is the end of today's video. In the next video I'll probably be starting doing the remaining odds and ends, the little bits and bobs that I've missed. So as always, if you do think I've missed something, do let me know in the comments below. If you've got any questions, do please pop any questions you've got in the comments section and I'll do my best to get back to you. And if you've enjoyed this video, do please like and or subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye for now.